moving on to the United Arab Emirates in particular, they are slightly different from Saudi Arabia since they already have a constitutional monarchy, or I mean, their monarchy is already limited. So now that they're trying to promote this more democratic, we may say, thought processes, what are the challenges facing them in particular?
I agree with you that the UAE is quite, in terms of, maybe ahead or advanced rather than Saudi Arabia. While the 160 members of the Majlis in Saudi Arabia are appointed, the case of UAE, I think there are 40 members of the parliament,
National Assembly.
the National Assembly. 20 of them are elected.
Sure, that's the plan according to
precisely.
their...
I think they will be having election Saturday.
Yes, sir.
November, December 16, right?
There was an announcement.
Okay. Well, in short, I think these are again signs again of the nuance in many of these countries where the operation of democracy varies from one country to another. Now, it may not pose as a serious challenge, I think, on the government of UAE, because I think their tradition is very entrenched. The role of the president, including the prime ministers, is such that they have been there for quite some time. So even if, say for instance, there will be elected members of the assembly who may carry different agenda, different from the president, I think they would not become a strong force to be reckoned with by the monarchies. By the government, because I think like Saudi Arabia, UAE has a highly developed economy. The people of UAE are quite satisfied with the governments. So I think the role of the soon to be elected members of the National Assembly would be more to articulate some concerns which are not heavily emphasized by the government. So in my view, this is quite positive. This is quite positive. In other words, the articulations of the representations of the people of UAE would be more reflective, and their articulation would be more reflective of what the people want. But it would not be enough to, I think, change the whole configurations of UAE. It will still be, I think, the same. Then, in fact, it will become, I think, more vibrant. There will be no reason for the soon to be elected members of the assembly, in a sense, to become like to rock the boat. There's no reason to rock the boat. Unlike other oppositions, possibly, or other elected officials, possibly in other countries, they have they can always do that. But in UAE, I think, with a very stable economy, a very stable political system, with a very stable relationship between the state and the federal government, I think there will be no reason to, that will endanger UAE as a monarchy.
It seems that the changes are being well accepted by UAE. But do you think that there are any particular challenges to these changes?
I don't think so. It would be that much. Maybe more articulations of maybe people's rights, people's participation in the political process. Maybe maybe more crystallized sort of what you call this, appreciations of maybe women's rights, for instance, or the maybe in terms of education, maybe the soon to be elected members of the assembly will articulate on this time. But it is just, like everything is provided by, is addressed by the government. So it would be more of a as I said earlier, the broadening, but it would not be a sort of a would pose a strong challenge, to the government, but a broadening of the political space. You see. Besides, UAE is a relatively small country in terms of territory, or in terms of population, probably there will be more, I think, concern as far as the rights of the UAE as citizen vis-a-vis the immigrants. So there are many immigrants, but they cannot also totally intimidate the immigrants because they are the workforce of the UAE economy. So I think a balancing of the interests of the people wherein other UAE should be able to find jobs, and not to be dominated also by the immigrants, because in Saudi Arabia that is the problem. There are many immigrants coming in Saudi Arabia. I don't know much in UAE, so that even, and that there is a culture in Saudi Arabia that Saudis are not really like willing to work on jobs which is quite menial, in other words. They are only working in the office, etc., etc. So that there are many unemployed Saudis, because they are Saudis, so they felt they have to be working in a white collar job. But I think this is the same to a certain degree in UAE. That's why balancing, I think, of the interests of the UAE as people in the interest also of the immigrants and the contribution to the driving force, the labor force in the UAE economy. But it's such that the immigrants should not be able to dominate also, because that would hurt in the long term, not only the economy of the UAE, but also I think the demographic makeup of the UAE. So I think yung mga ganung concern, that's I think, area that I think it's addressed even the coming in of the soon to be elected members of the assembly. I think the assembly, the government is conscious of this reality.